Welcome back to the Tiga Tactics podcast, a show about self-defense for civilians by civilians. We discuss all things personal protection, including martial arts, combat sports, and street combatives. Our resident MANs, martial arts nerds, include co-founder of Tiga Tactics and holder of black belts in 9 different styles, Dr. Conrad Bui.
Hello, everybody.
We also have black belt holder in 4 different styles, the other co-founder of Tiga Tactics, Patrick Vuong.
Hey, people.
And I am the third co-host, retired Army Special Forces soldier and champion obstacle course racing athlete, Evan Ultra-OCR man Perperis. Got a fun episode today. First, quick shout out to Vulpes Training. Conrad, why don't you talk to me a little bit about some of the products you got from Vulpes and what you like about them?
Oh, yeah, I've got a butcher knife. That's just training tool that other companies don't make because it's a common enough tool that you might want to train with if you're into training weapons or blades and things like that. And like we've always talked about before, it's a solid tool. So can't wait to make some videos with this and show everybody what it looks like.
Yeah, you'd think more training companies would make something like that, but it's just not. It's a lot of people don't think that's sexy. Like a common knife that you would encounter in a house. So,
Right.
But definitely a good training product to have. And if you want the sexy stuff, Vulpes has that as well. All right, today we're going to be talking about Shivworks Edge Weapons Overview. So I recently went to a Shivworks seminar, so we're going to be talking a little bit about that and some of my experience there. And why don't we start, Patrick? Have either of you guys ever taken any of their Shivworks courses?
I've not.
I have not, but I have heard good things about it. And what got you interested into taking this course here, Evan?
So I was deep diving all things bladed arts for my job, or at least that's what I tell myself when I worked at the combatives gym, because everyone kind of had a specialty. So I was like, well, I should research the blades because I already had a strong interest in that. And I had seen some of Shivworks stuff online. It looked like their pressure testing was really intense. I had heard Craig Douglas on, I believe, the Protector Nation podcast. I liked the things he had to say. I had heard good things from Brian Frias as well on some of the podcasts he was on. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to get a chance to train with them.
Cool. That's awesome. And I guess first, tell our audience members or listeners what and who is Shivworks, because some people might not be familiar.
Yeah, so Shivworks, company started by Craig Douglas. He's got some absolutely insane stories. He was a police officer for a long time. I believe he also had a military background for a little bit, but he did some undercover work and was in essentially life-threatening situations, being held at gunpoint, being robbed, and it was basically like, no one taught me how to deal with these situations. So he's like, now that I've experienced them, I want to like pass off what I've learned so other people are more better prepared for essentially fighting from 0 to 5 feet, that kind of in close range fighting with firearms and knives. So he basically, did his own research, pressure testing, etc., and came up with the system. Branded it Shivworks. I think he originally started teaching primarily law enforcement, then expanded to military, and then eventually expanded to civilians, and realized civilians are great to teach because people tend to pay as civilians, so they're very invested in the training, versus sometimes you get mil and law enforcement and they are being told they have to show up to training. So sometimes the motivation level is a lot lower.
Interesting. And do you know like how long he was doing the law enforcement stuff before he realized like, oh, I should break off on my own and teach?
I think he was, again, I want to say he was doing it for, I know he like did law enforcement for like 20 years, but I think he was doing, he did a couple of years of undercover work. And then I think he was probably involved in law enforcement for like a decade before he started teaching, and then was kind of doing it as a side job. And then eventually, when he retired, it became his full-time job.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. And how were, well, I guess with the name first, like Shivworks, that to me implies, knife stuff. Does he only teach knife stuff? Do you know if he does other things too?
No, so there are two main, I'd say the two most popular courses they teach are Edge Weapons Overview. Essentially, knife work in very close range, and then uh, extreme close quarters concept. So essentially, pistol work again in that very in tight range. So you're
Mhm.
fighting over a pistol in a confined space. And then they also have some other courses they teach, essentially like a vehicle combatives course, and part of their knife course and their pistol course is something called managing unknown contacts. And they also have that as available as an online course as well. Essentially, it's dealing with someone who you don't know
Mhm.
and setting boundaries, keeping them at a distance, and then using quote unquote verbal judo to assess the situation before making a decision to go lethal or non lethal, right? So.
Mm-hmm. That sounds great. So, and what about the seminar that you did specifically?
So yeah, I did the edge weapons overview. One, it was 2 days and it was 10 hours a day, so it is 20 hours over 2 days. So it was long, it was intense. It was expensive. I think it was about 500, but again, at 20 hours of training, if you don't break it down by hour, that's not ridiculous because I've seen short seminars that were 4 hours for $250, right?
Mhm.
So I thought the price was worth it. Um, and then, obviously I've trained with you guys a lot. I'm partial to Tiga Tactics. So I went in there like assessing it through a lot of like the Tiga Tactics lens because I think your stuff is very well researched. So I was curious to see if it would fit into that model of, Hicks law of being like uh, reductionist, simplistic, and effective with only a couple of options. And I mean, I honestly I loved it. I thought it was one of the best courses I've taken or seminars I've taken. Period, hands down.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I've heard only great things about Shivworks. So it's cool to see someone of your caliber and real life experience say the same thing.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
heard good things too.
the course started off, and I loved. It was very similar to our like knife course because we didn't touch a blade until I think like 7 hours into the course. And because it's like there's a lot of stuff that happens before you end up standing toe to toe with someone with
Mhm.
both with knives out. So
Mhm.
like we should probably work on that first. So there was a lot of stuff that happened before you even touch a knife. And you know, th- you don't have to ever take out a knife or a firearm if your verbal essentially judo works. You essentially leave the situation due to a combination of situational awareness, setting boundaries, and talking your way out of things. So that was cool to actually do like a bunch of reps prepping for that. And I'd written my book, Run If You Can, Destroy If You Must, and I talked about a lot of the stuff that they talk about in managing unknown contacts. And I was slightly worried I was going to show up there and he was going to like give me the complete opposite advice of like the stuff I had researched. So
Right.
like it was weird. I was like nervous going into the seminar because I respect Craig and Brian and a lot of their information.
Yeah.
And I was worried they were going to say something the opposite of that I believe. And it was going to
Right.
like shatter my conclusions and worldview.
Right. It's kind of like what they say, like, don't meet your heroes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But glad to hear that that they're legit and that you guys came to the same conclusions.
Yeah, and they talk a lot. They talk so many crossover points. They talk about pre-attack indicators, a lot of the same stuff we talk about in our seminars, which is cool.
Mhm.
Um, they're they're after we did the kind of that managing unknown contacts portion for about 4 hours. We spent about the next 2 to 3 hours just doing over like stand up wrestling. So very Greco-Roman wrestling based.
Mhm.
And it again, when I look at it through like the stuff we teach at Tiga Tactics, right? You could overlay the protect system that position. I can't even remember my own name.
Protection, reposition.
Yeah, thank you.
Offense.
You could overlay the protection, reposition, offense of the protect system, and their model would fit into that. Like
Mm.
it those two things align very well. Um, that we actually kind of went over essentially the sucker punch defense. Again, it was like almost one for one what we teach,
Mhm.
which was cool. Um, it passed Hicks law, which is we've talked about before on the podcast, right?
Right.
When you have too many choices, your decision making slows down. So
Mhm.
essentially, everything they do is reductionist. They call it reductionist, congruent, and binary. So reductionist, minimal amount of techniques, congruent, things flow into each other, and then binary. You use option A. If option A isn't available, you use option B. If B doesn't work, you go back to option A. and you just kind of bounce and forth between those two until you hit success. So,
Cool.
see, they also use the slow. Essentially, they use the slow, smooth, fast progression. That's not. They use different names for it. Essentially, but they use the again the exact same model for like training. And we did a lot of resistance work, but we also did a lot of like flow type drills and kind of exploring, and like a slow or smooth range. So that was cool as well.
Uh, Interesting. Do you know if he had done any traditional martial arts or combat sports?
Yeah, so both of them are black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Craig did a lot of traditional martial arts growing up. I don't think Brian did much traditional martial arts besides like more combat sports type stuff. But I know Craig used to be an FMA guy, and he's got some funny opinions on some of the traditional styles. So yeah,
Good, good. And so you progressed from verbal judo to what?
to grappling, so stand-up grappling,
Right.
and then from there. Um, there so there's counter knife work and there's offensive knife work. It was kind of a mix of both,
Mhm.
except their counter knife work has a different starting position. So their counter knife work starts from a concept of you're essentially grappling with someone and someone pulls out a knife, right? So
Okay.
it's a
Yep.
slightly different starting point. So again, I think the models fit well with each other because they're trying to solve different problems. But so essentially, you're in a grappling match, and then the bad guy pulls a knife and starts going lethal. And essentially, like, how do you deal with that?
Right.
Um,
So this sounds more like a this does happen in real life. It could be like a mutual combat situation. Or it could be a bad guy who starts empty-handed because he knows he has the weapon and he can draw it if he feels like he's losing the fist fight, so to speak.
yes, yeah, yeah. Um, and then after we actually took out the training knives and did some actual quote unquote knife work. So we talk about different strikes and angles and etc. And again, just like Tiga Tactics, very simplistic. There's not 12 angles or 24 angles. It's like three.
Mhm.
And goal is to get someone off you and keep them off of you. And then also very similar. They did talk about like different target zones, but again, it's like you stab what's available. You don't worry about making sure you get the subclavian and the splitting the third and fourth rib and etc.
Right.
Some of the more complex systems. So
Very cool. And was that primarily day one?
yep, that so there was I'm trying to even remember. It all kind of starts blending together, but essentially the first day we did one. It kind of culminated in what they call an evolution. So essentially a pressure test.
Mhm.
And then day two, we had two more pressure tests, and those were intense. I share those with you guys on a text chain. Anyone who's on my Patreon page will be able to see them along with my commentary. But essentially, one guy puts on like the impact helmet, and there are three different scenarios. The first one was essentially you work the managing unknown contacts, keeping the guy at distance, and then he attacks you. You have to defend, stabilize him, get control, and then you're allowed to pull out a knife and use it. Obviously, it removes the decision making process of like, can I use lethal force on this guy? But just like any drill, there has to be some artificiality created
Breaking
early.
up, breaking up. You broke off at removes the decision making process.
Yeah, so for Evolution 1, it removed the decision making process for can I use lethal force against this guy? And that's a training artificiality that, again, pretty much every training drill has some sort of limiting factor. So that was kind of the one for that. But it was very intense. And I mean, you guys have seen the video, and yeah, it was intense. I'll just say that. Reminded me of Army combatives days,
Yeah,
going through some of the courses.
it is intense. I'm curious, what was the makeup of the participants like? Were they all like, because they look like some pretty big athletic people.
Yeah, it was a mix. So we had I'd say 50% had a wrestling or jiu-jitsu background. So I would say there was a lot of grapplers there. But then you had a couple of people who were overweight, not in particularly good shape. We had one female in our class, and we had one guy who had essentially someone had been threatening his wife, and he was like, "I should probably learn some sort of self-defense," and he ended up here when he's essentially got no training background. So that was pretty wild to see as well. Um,
Wow.
Mm.
yeah,
That's
I
interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, go for it. Go.
Uh, I was just gonna say, we actually had a one of our students. He attended one of our seminars. He's mostly a firearm guy. Really, his only empty hand combatives training was with us, and he emailed me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I heard that Shivworks is coming to town. Do you think I should take it?" And I said, basically what I said here is that I've heard great things about them. Everything I see online is great. It's fantastic, very realistic, practical, but it does look very intense. So
It does. Yeah.
it may not be the best seminar to take if you have zero empty hand training. I don't know. Do you
Yeah.
agree with that?
I mean, yes. I agree in that you got to be ballsy to show up if with no training. I'll say that.
Hmm.
Do I think it's good and would it be valuable for him? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But going over positioning, even just like general proprioception of your body, I feel like it's harder if you're not used to that, right?
Hmm.
Like if you're not used to moving your feet and hitting with your hands at the same time, some of those pressure tests could have been and they're all hard, but it would have been harder. So it at the end of the seminar, Craig called it a master class for edge weapons, and I think that's a pretty good description. Um, can you jump right in? You can, but if it would feel, I think I would feel like I wasn't prepared enough coming in.
Right.
I'll say that. Yeah.
What?
Okay.
You
No.
felt what, Evan?
If I had no combatives or martial arts
Oh,
training,
okay.
yeah, I would feel, and I just like if I had a normal job and I just walked into that, I would be like, oh, this is another level.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
kind of makes sense. I also wonder if for somebody who's brand new, you definitely learn a lot of stuff, but how much do you retain and how much are you really going to absorb it? And it wouldn't be a waste of money, obviously, because it's still very valuable information, but it's almost like you need a couple of primers, so to speak, or warm-ups before you do a master class, as he said.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean I ended up taking their managing unknown contacts online before I went, and I had looked through some of their stuff on their YouTube page, which they actually have a fair amount of the course material available on their YouTube page.
Hmm.
Um, and I thought that helped me a lot because I went in there with already a general framework, and then listening to them, I could like refine some of the things I had learned ahead of time.
Mm.
Right.
So just like our courses, right? Like I would recommend taking the online version first, going to the course in person, getting those reps in, and then going back and looking at the online portion again to kind of like again really fine tune those techniques and be able to commit them to muscle memory.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So uh how much different was day two from day one? Did you feel like it was cumulative or was it completely separate topics?
No, it felt cumulative. It felt like it
Mm.
flowed. Everything kind of built upon each other and flowed into each other. And kind of
Yeah.
like our 2 day seminars, people show up the second day and they're looking a little sad. A little people are tired.
Yeah, yeah.
And I thought they did a really good job of easing us back into training. Like it wasn't like, all right, we're going full resistance. It
Right.
was like essentially we were doing flow drills with the movements from the day before, to kind of get our body used to it. And we did it for a while too. Like
Hmm.
we were just kind of exploring positions with like very little resistance, just getting used to changing, going from one position to the other.
Mhm.
Um, and they did it again. So many crossovers with Tiga Tactics. There's a lot of like ways to disguise getting more reps. It wasn't just do the technique once and then they built it little piece by piece, so you get a lot of reps. But by the time the weekend's over,
Mhm.
and they played, some of the drills are competitive, so you get some resistance, but then you also get so a lot of flow drill type stuff. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Very cool. So overall, what would you rate it out of 10?
Oh, 10 out of 10, easy. That's an easy 10. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's
Very
awesome.
cool.
I mean, I can't quite but like I work with you guys, so now I'm like very partial to you guys. So I feel like
Right.
I'm extremely biased.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm gonna remove all the Tiga Tactics courses because
Sure.
I'm biased.
Yeah.
It was my favorite seminar ever.
Mhm. Awesome.
Period. Yeah. It was just so good. The quality of information was high, the pressure testing was high, the the students that were there were all good natured. Like even though people were going really hard, I didn't feel like anyone was like purposely trying to hurt each other.
Good, good. So it was a good mix of people, and they sounds like they kind of laid the groundwork for everybody to have the same mentality.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. And they, they when they do those pressure tested evolutions, they made smart pairing choices
Mm.
um, to avoid, putting someone who's gigantic with someone who's tiny, and then, someone's getting their butt kicked pretty hard.
Oh, that brings me up to my other question, which is I've seen videos, where there's protective gear. How much did they require you to bring, or was this all the protective gear was them and you just borrowed them?
So you brought a cup and a mouthpiece, and then the helmet they provided, and then they provided the gloves. Yeah, and then they provided the training knives, the Tac Knives
Mhm.
brand
Right.
trainer knives. Yeah,
And with the
no.
helmet, were there enough? Is there one enough for everybody, or did you have to share? And like, I'm I'm for those of you who've trained with me, I'm the sweatiest dude in the gym, so nobody wants to share with me ever. So how did you share this helmet if you had to?
I think we had three helmets,
Yeah.
is what I'm tracking. So,
Mhm.
and you only wear them for that one pressure. You wear them for that one pressure test at the end of day one, and then the two pressure tests on day two. So you don't spend that much time on it. You put it on, you sweat in it a little bit, you take it off, and then you can wipe it out if you really want to, and
Mhm.
the next person will take it. So yeah,
Gotcha.
it didn't it didn't feel it didn't feel gross to me. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would have to be the last person to do these pressure tests then because I would sweat all over all of them.
Yeah. And then so that the pressure test day two was essentially like the scenario was you've already been in a scuffle, and then essentially one guy has their knife out, and the other guy has to close distance and grab you. So essentially the goal was to kind of keep someone off of you.
Mhm.
And then the third one was essentially a 2-on-1 evolution. So you start off with one guy tied up, and you both have concealed knives, and then you essentially fight to your knife, and then the second person comes in. And now you're fighting two people at once. So it was cool. These evolutions are not necessarily designed to make you succeed.
Mhm.
It's designed to make you feel pressure.
Mhm.
Kind of like a lot of our military training. They're like, we make the training harder than hopefully harder than it'll be in real life. So in real life, you're like, oh well, this is not as bad as it was when I was in some gym in the middle of the country,
Right.
fighting people off
Yeah.
with a spiked heart rate. Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think they're going for you're not so much testing them to see if they pass. You're testing them, testing their will, so to speak.
Yes, I would agree with that. Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
again, I honestly feel like you can take all of our like the slogans we have and the methodology we have, and you could plug Shivworks in, and it would all line up very well.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Very cool.
yeah.
Very cool. Yep.
So overall, what are your thoughts? How would you summarize it, and what would you tell our listeners about it?
I'd say the biggest pros, right? Simplicity, and the pressure testing. But I'd say were the biggest pros. I think if you've taken our EDC knife course and you want more pressure testing, if you want more pressure, Shivworks is a great place to go. Um, if you're coming from a grappling background, jujitsu, wrestling, and want something that is like feels a little bit closer to that, I think this is a great route to go. If you like edge weapons work, this is a great place to go. If you want to know how to fight in very they describe themselves as specialists, right? They are specialized in that 0 to 5 foot range, and this is where they focus all their time, right? So if you want to learn long range marksmanship like sniper stuff, they're not the brand you go to, right?
Hmm.
They are focused on a very niche problem and providing a very well researched and pressure tested solution. So that's kind of the pros. I'd say the cons were, it was expensive, right? So not everyone has $500 they can drop.
Hmm.
Um, Although they do travel around, they've been to like 49 of the 50 states. It was physically demanding, right? So you don't need to show up like me as an ultra athlete, but if you have no cardio and you don't train, I feel like it's gonna be a long weekend for you. Well, yeah, like if you're someone who regularly like goes to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu twice a week, I feel like you'd feel very comfortable in that environment.
Hmm.
And I feel like for guys who primarily do BJJ or wrestling, and are not into like that reality-based self-defense or the combatives world, I feel like this is a good entry point, because they're still going to feel like they're doing grappling stuff, but they're also going to get a lot more and an exposure to kind of that real world problem set.
Awesome.
And then I was like thinking like, well, what would I add to the course? And the problem with our course and any course really is if you add something, you have to take something away, right? So there's a
Hmm.
fixed number of hours.
Hmm.
So while I could be like, well, they should have added this, but then you would have had to like remove something because we were busy the entire weekend. So,
Hmm.
you know, yeah, it was really good. Again, if you like Tiga Tactics and you like but you want more pressure, I think this is a great place to go. Um, it was good enough. I would, despite its price tag, I would, um, if it's convenient, I'm going to go to another one in the next couple of years.
Nice.
So,
Would you take the same course or something different?
ideally, I mean, I would take the ECQC one. This firearms one would be really cool to take, but I don't have any of my guns on me, so that's not an option. I would have no problem taking EWO again, the Edge Weapons Overview. Um, or if they offered the VCast one, which is the vehicle one, I think that would be a really cool one too. We didn't get to do any vehicle work, although some of the other courses it really depends on the location and if they have a vehicle available. What
Very
else we got
cool.
coming up for Tiga Tactics, Patrick?
In depending on when this episode broadcasts, we have a webinar that everybody in the world can join because it's going to be on Zoom and real time. So if you've ever wanted to train with Dr. Conrad Bui and his fellow Kuntao Silat instructors, this would be the time. It's going to be July 5th. That is here in America. That is the holiday long weekend. But hopefully you'll be a computer or a mobile device will be accessible to you, and you'll have internet access. It's going to be our basically our Kuntao Silat webinar, and it's going to benefit his instructor Willem de Tours, or as we like to call him, Uncle Bill. He recently had an illness, and so he's recovering, and so the proceeds to this webinar will help him on his road to recovery. And unfortunately, healthcare in America is a very expensive experience, and so this will help him recover. And keep in mind, folks, he's almost 90 years old, so that's amazing. He's still an amazing person, huge role model for me, and obviously he's Conrad's instructor, right, Conrad?
Yeah, and he might be well enough to share a few things. Fingers crossed. And if you can't make it live, don't worry about it. You'll get a recording of the entire event as well too. And if you attend it live, you've got the recording as well too to review it over and over again.
And
Awesome. What else?
yeah, also in July, July 19th to 20th, we have our knife and pistol defense seminar, and that's a 2-day in-person event. It's going to actually be at Conrad's gym, right, Conrad?
Yeah, that's right. And we used to label this the worst case scenarios, and it is. It is. I mean, if you're staring down the barrel of a firearm or you're looking at somebody who has a blade that's intent on doing you harm. Those are the two scariest moments for anybody, martial artists. It doesn't matter what kind of training you've had. These are two classes that I wish I would have taken 10 years ago, because as a martial artist, I knew very little about firearms. And also, I thought I knew something about the blade until I researched the attacks that actually happened. And I thought, wow, none of this stuff is going to work against these knife attacks. So these are two seminars that I would have loved to take about 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Last kind of thought I had just thinking of hearing you talk about that and linking Shivworks topic was, I think the intensity of Shivworks might scare some people off who need the information. And I think I think that I think some of the people who've shown up to some of our seminars in the past have really benefited from the information. But some of those people would not be willing to show up to a Shivworks seminar. It would be too intense for them. It would scare them off. They wouldn't be able to walk through the door. So
Yeah, I think that's one of the positives of training Tiga Tactics Combatives is that we make it so it's almost universally useful. You could be the most high-level master in many martial arts, or you could be brand new, never have done a single day of any sort of training, and we can all come together and have a really good experience. And after a couple of days, people kind of all start to move the same way, which is really cool to see. To me, that's one of the most gratifying things to see, is like seeing a soccer mom who's never done any training move very similar to the martial arts master. And that's, I think, one of our greatest benefits if you're training with us, is that we'll get you functional very quickly.
Yeah,
But
at our previous seminar, sorry, Patrick, at our previous seminar, we had a lady, and the first day she came in, she's like, I don't want too much contact, okay? And at the end, she's just like tearing everybody up.
yeah, it was awesome to see. She was screaming, yelling, kneeing people, elbowing them, and at the end of it, she was very emotional in a good way. Like, she thanked us many times and said, "I couldn't believe that I could do this," and we kind of unlocked that inner warrior, but in a way that is welcoming for everybody.
absolutely.
We don't want to scare people away, because they need this training. People need this training, and we don't want to make it so intimidating that only BJJ black belts or tattooed tactical dudes will do it. We want everybody to be able to get this training, because it's much needed.
Absolutely. And then other than that, check the show notes down below of your favorite podcast player, and you'll see links to my books, Combatives Blueprint. You'll see links to my Patreon, which will have some of the Shivworks pressure test videos on there. You'll see links to Run If You Can't, Destroy If You Must. And then you'll see links to some brands, including Vulpes, Tenetco knives, and Takedown Sportswear down below. So check those out, explore some of their great products. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
All right. See ya.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. Appreciate it.